Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/IDontWorkHereLady, where Karens think that everyone on Earth is meant to serve them. And in today's episode, OP, somebody who can't talk, tells a story about the time they were mistaken as an employee by a Karen. And oh boy, it gets wild. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard in this one. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So this morning, I pulled into the parking lot of the Land of the Golden Arches because I was lacking my monthly requirements of carbs, grease, and caffeine. I parked next to a refrigeration repair van. There were obvious indications that it was currently in use by a technician for repair work going on inside. So I go inside and order my breakfast and then ate it while reading the news on my phone. But I was disturbed by a very loud customer. The woman screams and says, "Hey, you didn't wash your hands." She was standing in front of the counter and she was pointing at a guy in overalls with the name of the refrigeration company stenciled on them. The technician was behind the counter, standing in front of one of those glass-fronted refrigerators. The fridge was empty, presumably because it wasn't working. It was moved away from the wall and there were tools scattered around it and a gas canister of some sort next to it. The tech then looked at the customer and said, "I don't work here." He had sort of an embarrassed smile, as would anyone being publicly shamed for not washing their hands after going to the bathroom. Karen says, "I don't care." She was most definitely using outdoor voice. She keeps screaming and says, "You are behind the counter. I don't want your nasty hands near my food. They're black." That's when one of the cashiers said, "He doesn't work here, he's fixing our fridge." Karen, of course, was unfazed. She then says, "He's in the damn kitchen, so he must wash his hands. I'm gonna report you to the health inspector, his hands are filthy." Everyone behind the counter had enough at this point. The cashier ignored the customer and starts taking the next person's order. The fridge technician got back behind the fridge to continue his work. And finding herself ignored, Karen tries again and screams, "I'm gonna report you all to corporate. This is the nastiest restaurant that I've ever seen." While on the way out the door, Karen said some other stuff about bacteria and how everyone's gonna know about this. And for the record, the technician might have been able to wash his hands, but frankly, that would not have been enough. He had dust and grease and oil smeared on his coveralls and arms. And he had the look of a competent mechanic where the dirt and grease is ground in. We all just laughed when Karen left. Honestly, that's all you can do in a ridiculous situation like that, right? Is laugh it off. And really, does it matter that much, Karen? It's not like Fridge Guy was preparing the food that everyone's ordering. So why make such a big deal out of it, right? And OP was also right about the coveralls though. Like, why make your hands so clean when the rest of you is still filthy? Like, how does that make sense, Karen? But you all know how some people be, right? They just want to feel important, I guess, and they love to police the most ridiculous things ever. And while we're on the topic of people doing ridiculous things, listen to this next one, guys. For reasons I don't like to talk about, I'm almost completely mute. I don't ever speak, unless I'm in private with people I trust, like family, very close friends, etc. And even when I do, I have a bad stutter, so mostly I just choose not to. With that said, this happened a long time ago, way before cell phones were a common thing. Since I'm mute and my friends don't understand sign language, I often communicated by writing on a notepad that I carried around with me, or just using gestures, and most people are fine with that. This particular story happened when I was 16 years old. I was at a restaurant with friends and we had just told the server our order. Now I obviously couldn't tell her, so I just wrote it down for a friend to read it out. After that, I get up to use the bathroom. Now I should note that on this day, I was wearing black jeans and a blue shirt, which I suppose is similar to the uniform the staff wore, but they had the restaurant logo on their back. I was on my way back to the booth when I heard a stern voice call out, "Hey, you." So I turn around to see where it's coming from, and I was surprised to see the source of the voice, a bearded man, who we'll call Beard Guy. The guy was glaring right at me. The guy practically screams at me and says, "Can we get a little service around here? It's so damn slow." I just point at myself, as if to say, "Who, me?" The guy says, "Yeah, you." I left my notepad at the table, and the guy probably doesn't understand sign language. So I tried to gesture to him that I don't work there, pointing out how I had no badge, and pointed at my mouth and shook my head or whatever. But the message did not get to him. The guy then says, "Hello, are you stupid? Take the damn orders. I'm not playing games. It did upset me when he said that, but I'm a huge pushover, and I didn't want to make the guy more mad. So I gestured to wait 1 second, dashed back to my table, grabbed my notepad to the slight confusion of my friends, and then went back to him, and I start to write, "I don't work here." And I don't talk, I'm a customer. Now, seeing me with my notepad must have meant to him that she's writing our orders. So the guy starts firing off his order, but stopped when I hand him the note. He then reads it over, and he gives me a weird glance, but before he could say anything, my friend shows up to ask me what's happening, and if I was okay. The very same moment, a real server gets to them. The guy then acted like nothing happened, and he starts dictating his order to the server, while telling the server that he was just pranked and he'd said something about stupid kids, pretending to be mute in restaurants and playing dumb games. I heard him say that, and I got pretty upset, but I wrote to my other friends and we had a laugh about it. In truth, the whole situation was quite embarrassing. That guy was a jerk, and it sort of annoys me that I felt powerless in that situation while he just walked all over me. I dread to think how he treats actual servers. I also made it a point in the future to check what the uniform was before I went to eat, so I wouldn't get another situation like this again. Unfortunately, that hasn't stopped awkward situations. Yeah, so it totally sucks that OP was put in that position, guys, and that guy definitely was such an a-hole. And I've said this before, all you gotta do is walk away in situations like this. Like, if you're not a server, you don't owe that person a damn thing. Not an explanation, nothing. Okay, so in the next post, OP also doesn't talk, but he gives Karen and her husband the shock of their life, guys. Okay, so I've had some interesting encounters with fellow customers over the years. I guess I have the "I work here" and the "I'm an easy target" vibe. Now, this particular story stuck out in my mind for some time because of how disgusting people can be. On this day, I was browsing the pharmacy section at Target. I was looking for anything to help alleviate the pain in my throat. I was told by my doctor that I didn't have strep throat, but my throat was extremely swollen and burning, and I was told to rest my voice. As such, I was avoiding speaking. As I was examining the throat lozenges that were supposed to numb your throat, I hear a noise behind me. I looked over, and I saw a tall woman in her mid-40s standing there with a cart, with a man beside her. I just smiled at her apologetically and then stepped back, so she could pass in the narrow aisle. She then says in a snappy tone, "Do you know where the Pediasure is?" I then point just behind her where the different flavors were. They look behind them, and I step back to the throat lozenges, and I grab 2 brands and the numbing spray when I hear a throat clearing noise again. I look up to see Karen staring at me, while her husband was putting the Pediasure in the cart. She then says to me, "What's the matter, can't you speak? Why would they employ people who can't talk? I don't get it." Me, taken back by her rude tone and her lack of observation skills, simply shake my head, and I just turn to grab some cough drops. Her husband then laughs and says, "Where did you escape from?" Once again, I was taken aback by the rude tone and the weird question, but I was hurting so bad that I decided to ignore them and go look at the vitamins around the corner. But they weren't done though. They proceed to creep behind me with the cart, and they made awful comments about mute people, how my mother should have terminated me, etc. And they were laughing each time they crept closer in an attempt to intimidate me. Now, I'm not a nice person, I'm just gonna be honest. If someone messes with me, I'll make sure they never want to do it again. At this point, I just turn around, pissed off. Something in my face made them both physically take a step back. I then opened my mouth and let out the loudest and most satisfying scream that I've ever let out. Seriously, I screamed as loud as I could. Probably the whole store heard me. They both jerked back as I abruptly cut it off and gave them my most evil grin. They then booked it away from me. The pharmacist was covering her mouth, having witnessed the whole thing. She was trying not to laugh. To this day, I have no idea where they went after that, or if they reported me, or if security was called. I just paid for my stuff and walked out. I've been there many times and no one stopped me or called me out for being the screamer. And it did hurt to scream at them, but oh boy was it satisfying. Yeah, those two are definitely horrible people, guys, and it never surprises me the stuff that some people do, honestly. Like mocking a person for not being able to talk has gotta be one of the most piece of crap things that someone can do. And I only hope karma gets those two idiots. I have experiences like this constantly. I think it might be due to having spent 17 years in the service industry. I just have that look. I've started wearing earbuds wherever I go, but obviously that's not something I can do in restaurants and bars. On this day, my buddy was taking me out to a fancy French restaurant, and I was pretty gussied up. I really enjoy getting dolled up and wearing a beautiful dress to enjoy a wonderful meal. This particular restaurant has a well-known chef, who typically works at the station, expoing and plating where everyone can see him. It's also near the door to the only washroom and the server station. It's a huge restaurant, and with only the one washroom on this side, there was a bit of a line. So I waited, and at one point, I think the chef and I exchanged a few pleasantries. When I was next in line, a middle-aged man gets in line behind me. He had cranky energy, and he was shifting from foot to foot. It didn't seem like he had to go badly, just that he was impatient. I had been waiting much longer than him, and I found his constant sighing and scoffing irritating. When it was my turn, I reached for the door, only to have this awful man push in front of me and nearly knock me over, shoving himself through the open door. I was so taken aback that I sort of froze and said, "Excuse me, I was next." And to my surprise, the guy just wheels around and he starts yelling at me, saying he wasn't about to wait while some waitress changed her tampon. He then starts yelling at the chef that this place should have a staff bathroom because it's disgusting that staff have to use the same bathroom as guests. And the guy also implied that he might not pay for his meal because of it. I just stood there in absolute shock and a full bladder, while this man took care of his business, clearly taking his sweet time out of spite. The guy was in there for like 15 minutes, and that's when I decided, F it. I don't work here, but even if I did, there's no reason to be treated like I'm not human. When the guy came out, I used my entire body to block his path out of the bathroom, and I give him a stern but quiet lecture about how A, I actually wasn't an employee, and B, there is nothing wrong with sharing the bathroom with staff. And I told him that he had ruined what should have been a special night out. Again, this all happened in full view of the entire kitchen staff and several members of the waitstaff. I hadn't realized it at the time, but the jerk was actually seated next to my friend on the banquet. His female dining companion was sitting next to me. I had been gone easily 20 minutes, and my friend was confused and annoyed. I figured at that point I had nothing to lose, so I loudly explained what happened while gesturing to the awful man and making eye contact with the woman. The man just looked furious, and the woman silently glared at him. After a few minutes, the waiter wordlessly dropped their check. They were mid-meal, and they hadn't been offered dessert. But it was clearly a very pointed but polite "F you, get out of the restaurant." They paid without incident, and as they got up to leave, he tried to put his hand on her shoulder, only to have her jerk away and say, "Don't touch me. I'll take a cab home." The guy left first, and that's when she told us that it was their 4th date. And because of what happened, there will not be a 5th date. I'm just glad she realized that her partner's a complete jackass who got them both thrown out of a restaurant for screaming about tampons. You know, that guy got exactly what he deserved, guys, because clearly he thought he was above waitstaff and didn't even see them as human, which is disgusting behavior. With that said though, awesome response from the waitstaff, and the cherry on top, guys, was that his date recognized how much of an a-hole he was, all thanks to OP. So a while back, I was coming home from a costume party. I had gone as a police officer. The costume was very high quality, convincing, and realistic. I had also had too many drinks, and by the time I had left the party, I couldn't tell you what I was dressed as, where I was coming from, or where I was headed. I was on autopilot, stumbling back to the bus stop to head home. As I was making my way, somebody seemed like they were flagging me down. They were yelling, hey you, hurry, there's a couple fighting and I think she's about to stab him. You have to come quick." Now, still on autopilot, I stumble over in their direction, not in any big rush, so the woman was really floored and she kept yelling at me. And I'll be damned, there was a fight going on. Now, I wanted to say to the woman who'd flagged me down, "Why, thank you. How considerate of you to clue me into this awesome fight so I can watch." But I wasn't feeling articulate enough, so I just kind of gave a thumbs up, and I watched the two people scream at each other. It was a young man who looked as though he'd just woken up and come down from his apartment, and a woman who was dressed for the clubs but looked like a mess. They were screaming at each other, and she kept shoving and hitting him and making threats like, "It's always $50. Are you really gonna make me do this over $50? The guy just kept saying, "I'm not gonna argue with you, I'm not." At this point, everyone around was looking at me, but I don't have the slightest idea why. Finally, the woman who flagged me down said, "Well, aren't you going to do something? Why the F would you not stop a street fight?" Hearing that, I was baffled and a bit flattered, but also confused. I was trying to make sense of the situation. Like, was I somehow involved in this altercation? Did I know these people? Did I cause this fight? It was clear that everyone expected something of me. And while drunk, I thought, well, I am the biggest guy here, so maybe they expected me to stop it. So I decided to help. So with that, I charge over, doing my best impression of authority, while trying to place the face of either person in the argument. Now, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm told it was along the lines of, hey guys, chill. What's the matter? What's happening? Let's just talk. Stop. As I got closer, I see the woman was holding her car keys between her fingers. The key was jabbing out like she was Wolverine and planning to stab the man with it. Now, the thing is, I don't know the first thing about physical altercations. Sober me would have called 911 or something, but apparently, drunk me felt qualified to offer advice. There was a moment of stunned silence as the bystanders wondered how I could be so ineffective and useless, and the arguing people wondered whether or not I was going to arrest them. When it became clear that I was as clueless as they were, the argument continued. And that's when someone in the crowd said, "We should call another policeman, like 911. This guy's not doing his damn job. He should be fired." Meanwhile, I was thinking, what? Yeah, of course, I can't believe no one's called the police yet. This is really getting out of hand. Good idea. Maybe I should call. So there I am, slack-jawed, watching them, along with everyone else. When somebody finally screams at me, "You have to stop them. She's going to hurt him, like she's literally trying to hurt him with that key." The person said that while looking directly at me. Again, I wasn't sure why everyone seemed to want me to stop them. I mean, I was the biggest guy there, and I'm flattered they think I could do something. But I thought to myself, or one of you guys could do something. You were here way before me. But I figured I must be involved somehow and not understand why, because everyone kept addressing me directly. Like maybe I owed someone money, maybe I chatted with one of them at the party. In any case, I was feeling good from all this attention, and everyone expecting me to handle things. Finally, I mustered up the most authoritative voice I could, and I yelled out, "Cut it out with that key. That will not work. It's dull." I had everyone quiet again, so that was a step forward. I then say, "Now what exactly is the problem here?" They then start to explain, but they were both talking at once. And nothing they said gave me any better understanding as to how I was involved. So finally, I'm like, "Well, how do you two know each other?" And the guy said, "We're friends. She's a little overreacting right now." Now, in hindsight, the guy probably had some drugs on him or some other reason to want the cops to go away, because he seemed terrified, as he was saying it was all fine. As best I could piece together, stopping the fight would make everyone happy. So I thought back to how my mom would break up arguments, and I implored them, "Come on guys, friends shouldn't be arguing this way. Let it go. Whatever this is, we're gonna set it aside, we're gonna sleep on it, and everything's gonna be all right. Until then, I want you to hug it out. Come on." And then start ushering them into one another. I guess the girl didn't want to deal with people dressed as cops either, because though she put her keys down, she didn't go in for a hug. So rowdy drunk me was like, "Come on, hug. Anything could happen. Life is short. You could be dead tomorrow." And this poor girl thought the police were threatening her if she didn't comply with an order to hug it out. She then went for a hug, and I was like, "All right, where are you guys from?" And the guy was like, "I'm staying here at this building here." And I was like, "Okay, then you go home. You two need to cool off. And tomorrow, maybe you'll have forgotten about the whole thing." I then say to the girl, "You two, go somewhere else," while vaguely gesturing away from the building. She starts to say something about $50, but I was tired and ready to go home. So I was like, "Now, you can pick this up again tomorrow. You too, man, go inside, get some sleep, it's late." You could hear the crowd whispering in confused awe as I watched the girl leave and watched the guy go inside, just yelling over them if they tried to start up again, until they both cleared out. And then I stumbled off myself. I then went home, showered, passed out, and I barely remembered any of it the next day. I just vaguely remembered talking to some people arguing on my way home. About a week later, I went to my friend's house again, and someone was there who had apparently been in the crowd. They were like, "Oh my goodness, you're the cop who broke up that fight in front of my building. Between you and me, and I promised to keep it on the low, but were you drunk on the job? Because you seemed trashed." I told her I had no idea what she was talking about. And she was like, "Yeah, you were wasted. You were like slurring and everything. I even heard a woman say that she was gonna report you for being drunk on the job." We were all surprised that you didn't arrest that girl though. She punched that guy so many times. So like, did you make them hug it out to mess with them, or is that an actual thing they teach police to do to de-escalate things? And that got my attention, and I did remember the people I talked to hugging. So I asked her to elaborate, and she recounted the events, and the whole thing started coming back to me. I was like, yeah, that was me. Breaking up fights is what I do best. That's when my confused buddy was like, don't pull her leg like that, dude. Come on, they wouldn't let you be a cop on your best day. And I had to think about that one for a second because he was absolutely right. Finally, I put the pieces together and I sheepishly explained the mix-up. We all then had a good laugh over it, and I learned to never drink while dressed as someone it's illegal to impersonate, even accidentally, because you never know what could happen. Guys, I love this post so much, and I can only imagine everyone's faces as they were watching OP try to de-escalate the situation while slurring his words and thinking, is that cop effing drunk? But yeah, with that said, I'd love to see a picture of this police costume though. And OP was wild to play along, guys. I think even drunk out of my mind, I would have had the sense to be like, guys, I'm not a frickin' cop. Like, look at me, I'm absolutely wasted. So I'm an aspiring law enforcement officer. In one of the cities I'm close to employment with, I decide to do a ride-along with an officer to see what a typical shift is like. This shift started at 11 p.m., but at around 12:30 a.m., my riding officer and I responded to a burglary in process. The suspects were long gone. We did the whole cop thing, secured the area, phoned the shift commander, started the reports, and waited for crime scene investigations to show up. The suspects entered the business through a large front window by throwing a large rock through it. There was glass everywhere. At around 1 a.m., the owner finally shows up. The poor guy had to drive an hour and a half to get to the store. By this time, CSI was done with their tasks, and we began looking at the security footage. Now, as a ride-along, you should dress somewhat sharp. It's respectful, and obviously looks are good, especially if you're applying with the department. So I had on khaki pants, a long-sleeve button-down collared shirt. I was very business casual. While the CSI team, the store owner, my riding officer, and I were reviewing the security footage, a supporting officer shows up. And I could tell immediately that he was sort of an airhead. The guy walks in and says, "Whoa, they used a frickin' boulder?" The tone in his voice made me laugh a bit, and I just minded my own and kept my eyes on the footage. I come to find out that this place has been broken into 3 times over the past 3 months. The airhead supporting officer kept looking at me kind of awkwardly, but I ignored it. He then asked where the bathroom was. The owner told him, but the supporting officer was looking at me when he asked. My riding officer and the CSI team then asked, "Does he think this kid works here?" And they sort of laugh it off. The officer comes out of the bathroom, and after a few more minutes of conversation, he starts giving me tips on how to keep the business more secure. My riding officer starts snickering, but I decide to play along. I had a 15-minute conversation with this officer on how to be more secure in the future. He even recommended we put dummy phones on the shelf to fool potential thieves. It was a mobile phone store that got burglarized. I even took fake notes in my little notebook on his recommendations. And after torturing the officer for 15 minutes, I finally asked him, "So what exactly makes you think I work here?" That's when everyone just bursted up laughing. The guy tried to defend himself by saying things like, "Well, damn, you're not in uniform. And you're not a suspect, are you?" He then finally asked my riding officer, "Dude, is this guy a rider?" My riding officer, mid-laughter, just nods at the officer. He took a lot of crap from everyone until we left around 2 a.m. I got a good laugh out of a bad situation. And let's just say I really want on with this department even more now. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/IDontWorkHereLady. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where a psycho Karen decides to attack OP crazy for no reason. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.